For the Korean chicory painting, the lecture will be presented by our former curator, Kumja Kim. And for our Bonten and Taishakuten sculptures, the lecture will be presented by Professor Samuel Morse. And so, my apologies. Now, we've looked at the 9 sets of masterpieces, and so we are now going to continue with 6 iconic artworks that we have identified from our collection. You know, I'm using the word masterpiece and iconic. What does that mean? What do we mean by iconic? So, Webster's Dictionary, a great resource. It says, iconic, and this is the second definition, not the first, widely recognized and well established. The third definition, widely known and acknowledged, especially for distinctive excellence. So essentially, what I'm trying to say is that any one of these artworks that we call iconic, there is almost a one-to-one correspondence, so that when you see the object, immediately what comes to mind is Asian Art Museum. And so these are objects or artworks that have become famous to our visitors, to our audiences, so that, you know, you think Asian Art Museum, you think dagger handle in the shape of a demon. And there's sort of like, it's similar, analogous to the mathematical, I don't know, relationship where, you know, every masterpiece of the Asian Art Museum is an iconic artwork of the Asian Art Museum. However, not every iconic artwork of the Asian Art Museum is a masterpiece of the Asian Art Museum. So let us continue. So the first iconic artwork is this exquisitely carved object that was once the handle of a Balinese kris, or dagger. Now, as you may know, krises have long played important roles in Balinese society. And in pre-colonial Bali, almost like most men possessed at least one kris. And so they were weapons. You know, they were used in hand-to-hand warfare. They were also, and they're still, are markers of status, and they're sacred heirlooms, and they're also spiritually powerful objects. And interestingly, the most important part of the kris was its blade. So the handle itself is actually more decorative. And so royal krises would often have handles made out of precious materials such as gold encrusted with gems, such as this example you see here, or made out of ivory, such as our dagger handle in the shape of a demon. And so to give you an indication of the preciousness of ivory, in a mid-19th century account of a visit of a Thai trader to Bali, the king of Klong Kong requests that the trader, if he visits in the future again, he wants the trader to bring back, you know, one of 2 big elephant tusks. Whatever the price, doesn't matter the price. And so these dagger handles frequently depict a number of demonic figures, and usually these demonic figures are hard to identify. Sometimes they're also referred to as ogres or raksasa. But some of these demons are also said to depict the wind god Bayu, who was the father of Bhima from the epic, the Mahabharata. So Bayu plays an important role in this popular story. So Bhima was on a quest for holy water to rescue his earthly parents from death, and Bayu helped in that. And so it was perhaps because of this that he is said to hold a jar of the elixir of immortality in his right hand in some images of this deity. Now in this detail of the handle, it's very difficult to tell exactly what this demon is holding. So his left hand is grasping a piece of the cloth, perhaps a corner of one of his intricate sash. sashes. And then his right arm swings across his chest and grips a small round object. This orb is framed by his curving fingers, and his fingers have these elongated thumbnail, has an elongated thumbnail. And actually, long, sharp fingernails, and especially long, sharp thumbnails, are an attribute associated with Bhima, who used them as a weapon. So perhaps this is a depiction of Bhima. The second iconic work is this painting titled Travelers Among Valleys and Peaks from China, made in the Jin Dynasty. Now, first, let's look at what this painting is actually depicting. It shows a monumental landscape. So in the foreground, you see a view of the river flowing up in the middle distance. And two figures are shown crossing a footbridge. And then half visible in the valley, there is a Buddhist temple up on the right side of the painting here. And definitely the monumental landscape is dominated by this towering peak right here in the background. So this painting, for much of its history, actually, its date has been the subject of a lot of scholarly debate. So going, as far back as the late Ming Dynasty, the famous painter and art historian Dany Chan said that this painting must be a Northern Sung painting, Northern Sung from the 10th to the 12th century. More popularly today, the painting is ascribed to the Jin Dynasty, which is from the 12th to the 13th century. And more recently, Chinese scholars themselves are suggesting perhaps this painting should date to the Yuan Dynasty from the 13th to 14th century. And so Stephen Little, the curator at LACMA, will be presenting the lecture on this painting. And he said that the fact that it is the center of such debate is a great thing, and it only adds to the allure, to the intrigue of this painting. Now, Little had published an article in 1979 on this painting, and so I'm excited for him to revisit the painting in light of new studies on Jin Dynasty arts and culture. And so he argues for a 12th century Jin Dynasty dating for this painting. And certainly the similarities of the towering mountain landscape, the suggestion of atmospheric depth, and even the small figures traveling through the landscape connects stylistically this painting to the style of the 11th century master Guo Xi. And in particular, scholars have made the comparison between Travelers Among Valleys and Peaks and Guo Xi's 11th century painting, Early Spring. And so, when you do a side-by-side comparison, which unfortunately I don't know why I didn't put one up here, there are definitely similarities. And one of the reasons that we can explain for the persistence of this earlier style, Guo Xi styles, the persistence of the Guo Xi style is the fact that historically, when the capital of the Song Dynasty was captured by the Jurchen people in the north in 1127, that forced the Chinese to move south to establish what is now called the Southern Song Dynasty. So then in the north, the Jin Dynasty was established. Now, now that there's a new dynasty up in the north, artistic production did not end. It continued. And we know that the Sung imperial art collection had been seized during the conquest So that meant that the painters in the north, in the Jin court, had more direct access to these earlier styles, to these earlier paintings, than the Chinese in the southern Song dynasty. So as a result, it makes sense that these earlier styles remained in strong use in the north. So here are two examples of 12th century landscape paintings. The left one from the National Palace Museum in Taipei, and the one on the right from the Freer Gallery in DC. So what Little did in his 1979 article was argue for a Jin Dynasty dating for our painting. And what he did was he examined a total of 4 Jin Dynasty paintings, ours, these two, and a third one that I could not get an image of. And so, looking at all 4 together, he argued that during the 12th century, there was a transformation of Guoxi's style. So that, it was more like you can say a neo-Guoxi style. And this transformation was also founded by historical events. So from 1190 to around 1214, when the Mongols forced the Jin capital to be moved from Beijing to Kaifeng, Jin landscape painting also underwent this similar period of experimentation in style. So landscape painters in the north during the late 12th and early centuries worked from a number of traditions and created what Little called a period style that was based on Guoxi's style, but with their own distinctive approach to brushwork and ink handling. Now, I won't go into the details on how our painting embodies that. That will be in the upcoming lecture. But it is sufficient to know that these 12th and early 13th century paintings, such as ours here, not only are they distinguishable from the earlier 11th century Guoxi paintings, but they're also distinctive from what came after them. So that visually you can clearly see that travelers belong to its own style, distinctive style that was popular within a certain period of time. And so, according to him, currently this painting is dated to the Jin Dynasty. Now, the next Chinese iconic work is this mallet vase with warriors. Now, this vase was made during the reign of the Kangxi Emperor, and according to our curator, Li He, this vase she considers it as one of Kangxi's most magnificent porcelain works in terms of size, form, and decoration. Definitely among the finest that you can find anywhere in the world. And so the vase depicts the story of the legendary women warriors of the Yang family who went to battle for the 11th century Emperor Shenzong. So there are 50 warriors that are depicted on this vase, in addition to 6 mythological creatures. And then there are around the shoulder, there are the 4 elements of the gentleman, and some of the 8 treasures also appear there. Now, around 1670, the Kangxi Emperor reestablished the imperial workshop in the porcelain and manufacture center Jingdezhen here in the south, in southeastern China. So during the following 5 decades, actually, the imperial workshop reached new heights in technical expertise and creativity. So during this time, a new shape was created, known as the mallet vase, which is the shape of this vase here. And this is actually also extremely tall. It has a height of about 2.5 feet. And so its height makes this vase also extremely rare, because producing large-size vessels, there was a lower rate of success, higher rate of mistakes, because it was easy to have distortion or breaking during the firing process. Now, in addition to its inventive new shape and size, the decoration of this vase is also remarkable. It's sophisticated, it's dramatic, it's charming. It actually can rival an actual painting. How so? Well, first, there's the color palette. So the multicolor enamels that were applied actually introduces a new color palette that was inspired by European aesthetics, beginning in the early 17th century. And so you see a new variety of color tonalities. So there are actually about 13 tonalities on this vase in blue, green, red, brown, yellow, gold, black, and purple. And so the palette is new in terms of its softened hues and its gradations, the way that you see gradations in color. And this palette also speaks to the fact that it attests to sort of like the potter's absolute control over the balance and the amount of oxide metals that were in the colorants, and also with the firing conditions. Now, this vase is the only known example of its kind among the Kangxi mallet vases to depict the highest number of human figures on a single porcelain work, 56. And more extraordinary is that each of the 56 figures differ from each other in pose, gesture, clothing, and weapons. And also, meticulous detail was paid towards creating a narrative or interaction among all 56 characters. And then finally, to the arrangement of the entire scene was also well done in a very narrative storytelling way. So the storyline is set off dramatically on the terrace in an up and down movement. And then, so the presentation is complex but not disorderly. So a Japanese iconic work that is on our list is this portrait of Toyotomi Hideyoshi, dated to 1599. So Hideyoshi was one of the 3 lords who sought military control of war-torn Japan. It was his successor, Tokugawa Ieyasu, who would later establish the shogunate and inaugurate the Edo period. Now, this portrait was done in 1599, 1 year after Hideyoshi's death. And it was executed meticulously from the architectural parts of the canopy to the intricate floral pattern here on the mat. And then also, look at a close-up of Hideyoshi himself. He sits on a tatami mat. He's wearing the court headgear and a white courtier's robe. And then also, he has been known to be, quote, unattractive like a monkey, unquote. And so, our curator feels that the sharply staring eyes and the thin, bearded cheeks seems to convey this feature of someone who is unattractive like a monkey. So in addition to the skillful rendering of Hideyoshi, the inscription that is found here is also important because it was made by a famous priest, Seisho Shotai of Shokukuji Temple. So the inscription reads, "The hero of our time exceeds his contemporaries. His graciousness extends over all people. Korea and China sent envoys," unquote. Inscription by the priest Shotai, the 92nd abbot of Shokokuji. So in addition to having the famous priest's inscription, we also know that this painting was commissioned and made for Zenso, Hideyoshi's private physician. So you put those three elements together, the commission, the inscription, and the skillful depiction of Hideyoshi, this painting is certainly one of the finest among extant portraits of Hideyoshi. And so we have a couple of comparable examples. Here's a similar representation of Hideyoshi at the Osaka City Museum of Fine Arts. Now, Hideyoshi was revered as a god after his death. This is somewhat customary. And so apparently he is shown here in the style in which deities are traditionally represented. And so very similar to ours, suggesting that perhaps this is also a deified representation of Hideyoshi after his death. And then here's another example at Kodaiji Temple. An iconic work from India is this elephant throne howdah, which I'm sure many of you are very familiar with. It was recently shown in the gorgeous exhibition, and it's now back up in the galleries. And so, as you know, elephants were closely associated with rulership in South Asia. And so elephants bore many kings through battles, through hunts, and certainly ceremonial processions, which most likely is what this throne was used for. So here we have an historical photograph of a similar type throne without a canopy placed upon an elephant. And so we know that this howdah was used by royalty because it was covered with embossed and gilded sheets of silver. And here are a couple of close-ups of the gilded decoration. So some of the decorative motifs on the throne, such as the coat of arms here and a flower-filled urn here, represents or documents the artistic exchange between India and Europe during the colonial period. But then we also have a mix of motifs that harkens back to distinctive South Asian traditions, such as having the lions here on the front and the sides of the throne, continues to the South Asian tradition of associating lions with gods and religious figures and rulers. Now, the curator from the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts, John Henry Rice, will be giving a lecture on the howdah, and part of his talk will be to compare our howdah to Virginia's howdah. And so I'm looking forward to that because visually you can see the relationship, and historically there might be an interesting story there. Now, the final iconic artwork in our collection for this lecture series is this tanka depicting the Buddhist teacher Padmasambhava as Guru Drakpochi. Now, in the lecture, Jeff will actually be speaking about the tanka, the Tashupel tanka that we saw earlier, and this tanka together under his theme of time traveling in tanka painting. And to a little lesser degree, this painting does also represent time and space similarly. So the small tanka is certainly outstanding for its fine quality. And Padmasambhava is actually located right here in the upper left. And he transmitted Vajrayana Buddhism to Tibet in the 9th century. Now in the center here is Guru Drakpokji. He is the great fierce one, and he is a visionary form of Padmasambhava. And so he takes on this form to overcome obstacles to meditative progress. Again, the iconography of this tanka is complex and rich as well. So the fierce manifestation that we see here has 3 heads, 6 arms, outstretched wings. He's embracing his consort, and he's holding various implements that are associated with his form. And so around him are wrathful deities that are highlighted or standing in front of halos of flame. Now, the back of this tanka also has an inscription that praises a text called Lotus Skull Rosary. So this is the text from which the visualization of Guru Drakpokji is derived from. And the composition of this text is attributed to Padmasambhava. However, there's an interesting story behind the discovery of this text. So the rosary did not appear in public until the 15th century, when it was quote-unquote discovered by the Lama Pima Lingpa. Pima Lingpa is depicted here on the top right. So here we have Padmasambhava and Pima Lingpa. So the story goes, Pima Lingpa awoke from a dream in which he encountered an old monk who offered him a scroll. On the scroll, he saw a certain kind of cryptic letters that then allowed him to find and decode the Lotus Skull Rosary that was hidden 500 years before by Padmasambhava. And so when texts that are hidden and then discovered in this manner, they are called treasure or terma. And so the connection between space and time in this tanka, just like in the Tashapal tanka, is a doozy. And I hope I've made it at least somewhat clear. And so, actually, I've gone through this overview very quickly, but here is a collage of our masterpieces and iconic artworks. And, having launched our new brand a couple of years ago, and now looking forward to our 50th anniversary of the collection, I can wholeheartedly say that, these all-stars of the Asian Art Museum are basically the best ambassadors that we can ask for. And I hope that I've intrigued you enough, enticed you enough to keep coming back to learn more in-depth information about each piece. And please do go see them in the galleries. Some of them are up right now, and many of them will be up shortly. Thank you.